21st century learning. 21st century learning is defined in many ways as it encompasses so many facets of learning. Overall, it can be thought of as the accumulation of knowledge and skills in the classroom that will help students lead successful careers in the modern workplace. 21st century learning emphasizes what students can do with knowledge rather than what units of knowledge they have. I'm going to focus on the 4C's of 21st century learning, and these are the basic skills that all students need in the 21st century. So first we have critical thinking, next communication, following that is collaboration, and finally creativity. So to give a little insight on what these are, critical thinking is when students have the opportunity to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate concepts presented in a learning unit. Communication is when students have the opportunity to demonstrate their ability to articulate, listen, persuade, and motivate. Collaboration is when students have the opportunity to work with others in diverse settings, be flexible and open-minded, and contribute fairly to collaborative events. And finally, creativity is when students have the opportunity to think creatively, work creatively with others, and implement innovation. So the goal of the 4C's in education is that we need to utilize these skills in education by utilizing technology to do the following things. We want to guide students toward thinking critically about what they're learning, build interpersonal communication skills, work more effectively with teams, and create and innovate new ideas, concepts, and products. So to give a little bit more insight on that, I looked at P21, which stands for Partnership for 21st Century Learning. And this is a network of Battelle for Kids. And what they're trying to do here is really just implement 21st century learning, help people learn about 21st century learning, and just kind of create a framework and a guide for 21st century learning, and specifically these 4C's. So the following are explanations of the 4C's created by P21, and there's examples that follow of how they could or have been used in the classroom. Diving into critical thinking. So the two main aspects of critical thinking is reasoning effectively and solving problems. So we see over here on the side, critical thinking is looking at problems in a new way and linking learning across subjects and disciplines. So we see some examples listed through here, such as using different types of reasoning, analyzing how different parts produce an overall outcome, interpreting information to figure out conclusions, and reflect critically. Under solving problems, we see things like solving different types of problems that might not be familiar to you in both conventional and innovative ways, and identify and ask questions that clarify various points of view to lead to better solutions. Some examples of critical thinking in the classroom. Teachers could model higher level thinking by reasoning and discussing how they solve problems and how they think about their own thinking, which is metacognition. We could encourage the use of Google Docs so students can save work, share work, and have opportunities to take part in reviewing and providing feedback to peers. And lastly, students could be able to participate in virtual tours and live webcams into their classrooms so that they get background knowledge on experiences and places that they might not have been before. Different tools that could be utilized to help with this could be pre-assessments, Modius points, self-assessments, reflective journals, and metacognition logs. Now, in my own classroom, I was able to partner with Beaumont Hospital for Nurses Appreciation Week, and they actually took us on a huge virtual tour of the hospital that my students were able to be a part of, be submerged in, ask questions, all the good things. So that was a really good way for them to experience something and gain background knowledge in something, and be able to take that new information and think about it and ask questions and all the good things. Next is communication. So for communication, we are sharing thoughts, questions, ideas, and solutions. And we want to be able to communicate clearly. So students being able to articulate their thoughts effectively in different modes. So oral, written, nonverbal communication skills, we want to really uplift those. Also listening. Communication doesn't just go one way, it goes both ways. So listening effectively, and communicating for different purposes. So we see this a lot in writing. We'd have informational writing, writing to instruct, motivate, or persuade. But we can also use different types of media and technology to communicate. We see this a lot with Google Docs. And we want to make sure we're doing that in diverse environments. As I mentioned previously, Google is a great way to really expand the way that we communicate within and without the classroom. So examples of communication could be using Google Apps to communicate, where teachers can create surveys using Google Forms at the beginning of the school year or the beginning of a course, and you can ask students about their background knowledge, and that will help kind of guide the way that you go about what you're going to teach. You can also use Google Docs for feedback on writing assignments. I did this in my classroom this year with writing and our writing units. We really utilized Google Docs. This was a great way for my students to peer review, so they were able to make comments on each other's writing. This was helpful with time constraints too, because a lot of my students were at different points in their learning, and so they weren't able to always give peer feedback at the same time. So this allowed us to do that whenever they were ready for it. It also allowed me as the teacher, who is going in many different directions all the time, to be able to quick give some feedback any moment that I had a chance to, and it was a really great tool. We can also use tools like message boards, like Twitter, other online lecture tools that help really bring out students' voices in the classroom. A lot of students don't like speaking up in class, so they can use different video tools like YouTube or iMovie to really get their voices heard in the classroom without actually having to speak in front of people. Collaboration. So collaboration is actually a second part of communicating clearly. So with collaboration, we want to work together to reach a goal, putting talent, expertise, and smarts to work. So we want to work effectively and respectively with diverse teams, being willing to help one another and make compromises, share responsibility to make sure we actually are collaborating and all contributing. And all the team members can come together to do that. Examples of collaboration. So the class could create a class wiki to collaborate with each other, or any other shared document tool where everyone can kind of contribute, come together in one document to share their ideas and create a final product. And also creating groups. You can give the group a hashtag, and they can go do something like a research project. And when they go to share it with others, they can use their group hashtag on Twitter to share those ideas. So for tools for that, we could use Google Docs, as I had mentioned previously, Evernote, Padlet, any social media, including Twitter, EduBlog, FlowDoc, ThinkBinder, Groupboard, Twidla, Pinterest, the list goes on. In my classroom, I use team jobs a lot, especially in my science classes. This is where students work in a group and each person takes on one job. So this could be something like team leader or timekeeper or note taker. That way everyone has a job to do and everyone is contributing to that group in some way. And creativity. So aspects of creativity. Creativity is trying new approaches to get things done innovatively and making sure you are creating things, so inventing things. 3 aspects of that: think creatively, work creatively with others, and implement innovations. So we want to use a lot of different idea creating techniques here, a lot of brainstorming. Make sure you're creating new ideas that are worthwhile. Elaborate, refine, analyze, evaluate your ideas to improve and maximize your efforts. When we work creatively with others, we want to develop, implement, communicate ideas with others effectively. We want to be open and respond to different perspectives. We don't want to shut people down. We want to incorporate the group and give feedback to whatever you're working on. We want to be original and inventive, and keep in mind real world limits. So shooting for the stars, but knowing you can't actually get to the stars. We want to look at failure as an opportunity to learn. Understand that we're going to try, and small successes are okay, as well as frequent mistakes. And finally, we want to implement innovations. We want to act on our creative ideas to make sure that we're contributing to this field of innovation, and we're going to figure it out. Examples of this: maker spaces really inspire creative thinking. Allowing students to choose digital tools and resources really gets their creativity flowing with choice. Coding, creating their own websites, robotics, other problem solving, and maybe a 3D timeline, looking at history, local events. We can use lots of tools for these things. Presenting, you could use Keynote, Powtoon, Studio, Prezi, Slides, and Google Slides. If you wanted an interactive video, there's TED-Ed, Educanon, Edpuzzle, and Zaption. So in my classroom, to help foster creativity, we have morning choice, where the students are allowed to choose how they want to start their morning. They might have different creative choices like drawing or building with Legos. And that's just a really great way to get their creativity flowing in the morning. So moving toward 21st century learning for myself, an example that I thought of was during our personal narrative unit. I was thinking that I could partner with a classroom in another city or a state to create pen pals for my students. And then we could use those pen pals to eventually send their personal narratives to. And depending how deep that goes, they could help them peer edit via Google Docs, or they could just email it to them to help get to know each other and tell them a story that happened in their life. So this would influence all of the 4C's within this unit while using technology grounded in the goals of that unit. So 3 things that I can do to move toward 21st century learning. I can utilize the TPACK framework, make sure that all my technology integration enhances the learning that is happening for the goal of the lesson or the unit. I want to merge the 4C's and technology, because I feel like so far in my career, I've used these separately. So moving forward, I would like to find ways to enhance my use of the 4C's with technology, as it can deepen those experiences for my students. And finally, I can utilize my professional learning network. This will help me make connections with others to enhance my students' learning. For example, it could help me find those pen pals for my students in the example that I talked about previously.